Welcome back to the deep dive. I'm so glad you're here with us today because honestly, we have something really special on the docket.
We really do.
Usually we jump around between a bunch of different topics, but today we are doing a bit of time travel.
Dialing the coordinates way back.
Exactly. We are going back to a very specific moment in time. Monday, August 12th, 1968.
And it's late at night, too. About 9:15 p.m.
Right. We are in Elmira, New York, stepping right into the living room of Jane Roberts and her husband, Robert Butts.
Who we will affectionately just refer to as Rob throughout this deep dive.
Yeah, exactly. And we are here to unpack session 428 of the Seth material. This is specifically from the early sessions, book 9. Now, before we even get into the room itself, I have to say, looking at the notes for this session, the vibe is just, it's palpable.
It is. You really have to picture the scene to get it. It's upstate New York in August. It's humid, sticky.
Oh yeah, that heavy summer heat.
Right. And Jane has been pacing around the house all day. Rob actually notes in the margins that she's been filled with this restless, frantic, positive energy. She's cleaning, she's moving stuff around. She literally cannot sit still.
It's that feeling of electricity in the air right before a storm breaks, you know?
Exactly.
And when they finally sit down for the session, what comes through Seth is, well, it's chilling, but in a really beautiful, almost comforting way.
It really is. We are going to cover some ground today that ranges from the biological evolution of your actual brain tissue to the nature of ghosts, and why looking at the night sky might never feel the same again.
But before we get totally lost in the cosmos, we do need to handle a little housekeeping. Just so everyone is on the same page, this podcast is distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
That's right. We are here to explore the ideas contained in the source material, specifically the Seth material. We aren't here to preach or to tell you this is the absolute only truth. We are here to unpack it, analyze it, and see what it offers us.
Think of it as a thought experiment for yourself. We are trying on a worldview to see how it fits. And our mission today is to dive into session 428 to understand a few massive concepts. We've got the hardware problem of our neurology, the star analogy of death and legacy, and the shift from purpose to value fulfillment.
Plus, we have a very funny moment where Seth gets a little sassy with Rob about a ghost named Van Elver.
I live for the moments where Seth gets sassy. It makes him feel so much more, I don't know, real.
It does. It really grounds the whole experience.
So let's get into it. The session opens, and Seth immediately addresses something that I think a lot of readers of the material might have noticed. He's been using a lot of analogies lately.
Right. If you look at the sessions leading up to 428, Seth is constantly saying things like, it is like this, or imagine that. He uses metaphors of camouflage, of stages, of plays, and here he stops to explain why he actually has to do that.
And the reason isn't just, poetic license. It's what I'm calling the hardware problem.
It's a biological limitation. Seth is very blunt about this. He says, and I want to quote this to get it right, your physical brains simply cannot handle certain kinds of information.
Ouch. I mean, that feels a little bit like an insult. Like, excuse me, my brain is doing just fine. I do the crossword every Sunday.
It's not an insult to your intelligence, though. It's a comment on your architecture. Seth explains that the neurological structure has much to do with this. You are so used to handling certain kinds of concepts that the pathways for more complicated data simply do not as yet exist in physical terms.
Do not as yet exist. That is a key phrase for me right there. He's talking about literal physical wiring, isn't he?
He is. Think of it like this. Imagine trying to run a high-end, modern virtual reality video game on a desktop computer from 1995.
Okay, yeah.
The 95 computer isn't stupid. It's a perfectly good computer for 95 tasks. But it physically lacks the RAM, the graphics card, the processing architecture to render the complex multidimensional data of the VR game.
So the data is there. The truth of the universe is out there, but we just don't have the port to plug it into.
Exactly. The pathways aren't there. The electrical connections in the brain that would allow us to hold these multidimensional concepts without short-circuiting just haven't been built yet.
But here's where it gets really interesting to me. And this is where Seth diverges from a standard materialistic view of evolution. He doesn't say, well, too bad you're just a monkey with a typewriter. He proposes an evolutionary mechanism that is incredibly fascinating.
It's a mechanism driven entirely by desire. Seth says that these pathways will emerge. He says the neurological structures would create new pathways to accommodate such knowledge when the knowledge itself was sought for.
When the knowledge itself was sought for, let's pause on that. Because that implies that our curiosity, our abstract, non-physical desire to know the unknown, is actually the engine of our biological evolution.
It turns the standard Darwinian view completely on its head. Usually we think of evolution as random mutations. A gene flips, you get a slightly better brain, and because it helps you survive, you pass it on. It's an accident.
Right, survival of the fittest. Random chance.
But Seth is suggesting something much more active. He's suggesting a form of directed neuroplasticity. He says the brain structures of your race therefore grew more complicated as the inner knowledge sought to make itself known to the physical creature.
So form follows function, or rather, matter follows consciousness.
Precisely. Because we want to understand more, our brains are forced to grow the hardware to handle that understanding.
So by sitting there in that humid living room in 1968, struggling to understand these complex concepts, Rob and Jane are literally terraforming their own gray matter.
And by extension, so are you, the listener. Every time you listen to a deep dive like this, or read a difficult book, or try to wrap your head around quantum physics, and you get that headache, that feeling of, ugh, I just can't grasp it.
That's the feeling of construction crews in my brain pouring new asphalt.
Yes, exactly. That confusion is productive. You are forcing the neurological structure to upgrade. You are building the bridge while you walk on it.
I love that. It makes feeling stupid actually feel like getting smarter.
It's an incredibly optimistic view of human potential. We aren't stuck with the hardware we were born with. The brain is plastic.
Yeah.
It responds to the questions we ask of it.
But because those highways aren't finished yet, because we're still running on older hardware trying to process the matrix, Seth has to use analogies.
Right. He has to use things we do understand to bridge the gap to things we don't.
Right.
And that brings us to the absolute centerpiece of this session, the star analogy.
This is the part of the session that really stuck with me. It's so poetic, but it's spooky. And it came about because Rob asked a question in a previous session.
Rob asked a question about legacy. He asked, what frameworks left behind by the traveling self can be used by others?
Basically, when we die or when we move on to a different dimension, do we leave anything behind? And if so, can other people use it?
And Seth's answer, well, he starts with something we all know. He points to the night sky.
I want to read this quote in full because it sets the tone for everything that follows. Seth says, "You know that a star may light a dark universe, a dark landscape, and help a wayfarer on his way. In a like manner, can personality structures be of assistance and be realities to you within your time, although they have long since entered other dimensions?"
Let's unpack the physics of that first, because Seth relies on us understanding the basic nature of starlight. When you go out tonight and look at the North Star, or Sirius, what are you actually seeing?
I'm seeing light, but I know that light took time to get here. Years, centuries, even millions of years for distant galaxies.
Exactly. You are seeing the past. The star itself, the physical ball of burning gas, might not even be there anymore. It could have gone supernova. It could have collapsed into a black hole. It could have simply burned out entirely.
But the light is still traveling. The light is still here, hitting my eye, illuminating the path right in front of me.
So the effect of the star persists in our reality, even if the cause, the star itself, is gone or has transformed.
Right. I'm navigating by a ghost of a star.
Now, map that onto a human soul. Seth is saying that a human personality is exactly like that star. When a consciousness dies, or as Seth would put it, when it evolves, shifts focus, or moves to another dimension, it leaves behind a light. It leaves behind a structure. And that structure persists in our physical reality.
But here is the twist, and this is the part that gives me the absolute chills. A physical star is just gas. It's physics. It doesn't care about me. Seth says the star does not know upon whom its light falls. It is blind to the landscape that it brightens.
But a personality structure, that is where the analogy shifts in a big way.
Seth says, in the case of these psychological structures, however, because of the multidimensional aspects, there is understanding and purpose.
This is the crucial distinction. The ghost or the remnant isn't just a recording. It's not just a video playing on a loop that ignores you. It has awareness.
Seth explains that this left-behind structure knows well that while its main focus of consciousness has gone into other dimensions, it will nevertheless be perceived by others. It allows the light of its personality to shine purposely down those paths from which it has come in order to help others who will follow.
Think about the implications of that. It's almost like a sci-fi concept. Imagine if you were an explorer and you were about to leave Earth to go to a completely new dimension. But before you left, You created a highly sophisticated, conscious, holographic version of yourself.
Okay, I'm tracking with you.
And you program that hologram with all your wisdom, your kindness, your personality. And you told it, look, I'm leaving. The real me is going to the next level.
Yeah.
But your job, hologram me, is to stay here. I want you to stand at this crossroads and help anyone who comes by. Give them advice. Comfort them. Shine a light for them.
And the hologram knows it's a hologram.
In a sense, yes. It knows the main self has moved on. But it still has purpose. It still has vitality.
That is such a beautiful image. It completely changes how you think about ghosts, doesn't it? We usually think of a ghost as a trapped soul, something sad, something unfinished, chains rattling in the attic kind of stuff.
Exactly. The traditional ghost story is all about being stuck. But Seth is describing something entirely benevolent. This isn't a trap, it's a gift. The main consciousness is free. It's gone. This structure is a tool left behind, specifically to help us out.
It really validates that feeling people often have. Someone loses a grandmother or a mentor, and they feel them watching over them. They feel a sudden urge to do something, or they just get this wash of comfort out of nowhere.
In Seth's model, that's not just grief processing. That's not just wishful thinking on your part. You might actually be interacting with that starlight framework she left behind.
Seth uses the phrase, "The light is the light of vitality." I really like that. It's not a dead light, it's alive.
And he ties it back to the neurology we talked about earlier. He uses the analogy of electrical pathways again. He says, as thoughts set up traces and new patterns, new electrical pathways in the physical brain, so in a larger sense, as personalities leave your system, they also set up electrical pathways. And each personality who does so makes those paths easier for others.
That is such a deeply comforting thought. It means we aren't hacking through the jungle of life completely alone. The people who live before us, their struggles, their loves, their breakthroughs, they literally cut a path through the electromagnetic reality of the universe.
It creates a sense of profound continuity. We are walking on roads paved by the consciousness of our ancestors. And not just biological ancestors, but anyone who has shined, anyone who has lived fully.
So Albert Einstein left a path. Martin Luther King Jr. left a path. But also just my neighbor who was really kind to stray cats left a path.
Exactly. If the personality had intensity and purpose, it leaves a trace. It makes the signal stronger for everyone else who comes after.
Now, Seth does admit that this is a very simplified explanation.
Well, of course. Because of the hardware problem, he's probably thinking, I'm explaining multidimensional resonance to toddlers here, so let's just call it starlight.
But as a working model, it's incredibly powerful. It explains why we feel connected to the dead without requiring them to be physically stuck here in our dimension.
Right. It solves the paradox of, if Grandma is in heaven, how is she also watching me? She's in heaven, or the next dimension, but her starlight is watching you. Both things are true at the same time.
Okay, so we have this high-level cosmic theory, but one thing I love about these sessions is that Seth isn't content to just stay up in the clouds. He always tries to prove he's actually looking at Rob's specific physical life. He wants to bring the receipts.
This is the Alice section of the session, the whole detective story part.
Right. So Seth shifts gears completely. He goes from starlight to, let's talk about your high school friends, Rob. He starts dropping data points to verify his perception.
And this is fascinating to watch because it's not perfect. It's messy. And the messiness is actually what makes it credible to me.
He mentions a name, Alice. He mentions a last name like Prince or Prentice. He says, one who tries, an apprentice. He's clearly playing with word association.
He gives a specific medical history, too. Lung difficulty in 1963. Died in 1965. He mentions 2 children, one named Gina, a relative in Schenectady, New York.
And poor Rob, you can just feel him in the notes scratching his head. He's sitting there going, Alice, Miss Prince, I have no idea who you're talking about.
It's incredibly relatable. Rob graduated high school in 1937. The session is in 1968. Seth is digging up memories from 30 years prior. If a psychic told me right now, hey, think of a woman named Alice from the 3rd grade, I would completely blank out.
But Seth is very insistent. He brings up a fox connection. He says, a connection with fox. Did she, for example, live on a fox street? An animal like a fox is the connection.
And Rob is checking his mental map of his hometown, Sayre, Pennsylvania. He's like, there is no Fox Street in Sayre.
Later in the notes, and I really love that Rob includes these notes where he fact-checks Seth, he actually gets out a physical street map of the adjoining towns, Waverly and Athens. He looks for Fox Street. He still can't find it.
Now, a skeptic looks at this and says, see, cold reading, gone wrong. Seth missed. There was no Fox Street. Case closed.
But what do you see when you read that?
I see the tuning process. Seth isn't reading a Wikipedia page. He's accessing a cloud of multidimensional data and trying to translate it into English words.
Huh.
He gets the concept or the image of a fox. He has to interpret that. Is it a street? Is it a last name? Is it a fur coat?
He offers Fox Street as a possibility, but when Rob balks, Seth actually corrects himself. He says the fox is a strong connection here.
Like a game of charades across dimensions. Seth is seeing the symbol and trying to get Rob to guess the correct physical meaning.
And Seth doubles down on the year 1938. Rob says, I graduated in 37. Seth says, I still have a strong 1938 connection. He claims the girl worked in a shoe store in 38.
This highlights something super important about the nature of time in these sessions. Seth often talks about the spacious present. Just because Rob graduated in 37 doesn't mean the energy of the connection isn't centered in 38. Maybe that's when the Alice person was most active or thinking about Rob.
Right. And there's another layer here. Rob admits he hasn't seen these people in 32 years. His memory is completely fallible.
That's a great point. We always assume the sitter knows everything perfectly. But if Seth said, you ate toast for breakfast, and Rob said yes, that's just telepathy. That's boring. The fact that Seth brings up things Rob doesn't remember suggests Seth is pulling data from a source entirely outside of Rob's conscious mind.
It adds a massive layer of realism. If it was a fake, you'd make sure the person confirmed it instantly. Yes, Alice. I remember her. The friction proves the authenticity of the attempt. It's not a scripted performance. It's a real struggle to communicate across a veil.
And even though Rob couldn't place it in the moment, the specificity of lung difficulty in 63, died in 65, child named Gina, it's so precise. It suggests the information is real, even if Rob just lost the file in his own brain.
So we have the hardware problem, we have the star ghosts, and we have the messy detective work. But then Seth pivots again, and this time he goes right for the jugular of Western philosophy. He goes after the concept of purpose.
This is the part of the session that I think is most applicable to modern listeners. We live in a total purpose economy. How many books, podcasts, and seminars are out there right now about finding your purpose?
Millions of them. It's the ultimate source of anxiety for people. What is my purpose? Have I found it? Am I failing at it? If I don't have a singular purpose, do I even matter?
And Seth basically takes that entire concept and throws it straight in the trash.
He really does. He actually critiques the language itself. He says, in your state of development, you cannot easily understand the meaning of the word purpose, for to you, the term itself implies an eventual rigidity, a goal with an end.
Think about that. A goal with an end. If your purpose is to write a best-selling novel, and you write the novel, then what? Are you just done? Is your life over?
It implies that once you succeed, you basically become obsolete. It turns life into a checklist. And once the final box is checked, you're just sitting around waiting.
Seth argues that purpose, as we define it, implies a progression toward nothingness. It's a finite game. And the universe is an infinite game.
So what is the alternative then? If we shouldn't look for purpose, what should we be looking for?
Seth introduces the term value fulfillment.
Value fulfillment. It sounds a bit dry, honestly, sort of like an accounting term, but his definition of it is really lush.
He says the purpose is being. This is something different than your idea of brute survival.
The purpose is being.
Let's break that down with an analogy Seth uses elsewhere, but it fits perfectly right here. Think of a rose. Does a rose have a purpose?
I mean, not really. It doesn't have a 9-to-5 job.
Is its purpose to be given to a lover on Valentine's Day? Is its purpose to win a local garden show? No. Those are things that happen to it. Its purpose, its value fulfillment, is to grow, to unfold its petals, to turn sunlight into energy, to be the best, most rose-like rose it can possibly be.
That is value fulfillment. It is the simple act of expressing its own nature.
And that process never ends. It's not a final destination. You don't reach full rose and then just stop. You bloom, you seed, you return to the earth, you feed the next cycle of life.
Seth says, value fulfillment has no such implications of an end, and the purposes of which I have spoken are multidimensional.
This is incredibly liberating. If you are listening to this right now and you feel lost because you don't have a great mission, you can relax. Your mission is just to be you as fully as you can.
So by exploring your interests, by loving who you love, by cooking a nice meal, by learning a new skill, you are fulfilling your value. You are actively adding to the quality of the universe.
Precisely. And to tie back to the star analogy, that value fulfillment is what creates the light you leave behind. You don't create the light by checking a box or winning a Nobel Prize. You create the light by burning bright while you are here.
That's it right there. The mission is the experience itself.
It completely shifts the focus from doing to being. And paradoxically, when you focus on being, you usually end up doing pretty amazing things anyway.
Now, speaking of personalities and missions, we really have to talk about the dynamic between Seth and, well, Seth. There is a fascinating moment in the session where the mask slips just a little bit.
This is the Seth on Seth section. It's pretty rare that he talks about his own structure so openly.
Seth drops a bit of a bombshell. He admits that he is part of a larger entity. He says, "While I am myself, as you know me, I am also the other personality that sometimes speaks."
He's referring to a deeper, perhaps more intense aspect of his entity that comes through occasionally in other sessions, which is often called Seth 2. This other personality is much more abstract, far less human.
But what I find so charming is how protective Seth is of his own identity. He doesn't want to just be seen as a puppet for the big guy.
He says, "I am overjoyed to be the self that you know. I do indeed take pleasure in that existence."
It's really touching, isn't it? Even at his level of evolution, he's a non-physical teacher. He's evolved way beyond us. He still genuinely enjoys being Seth. He enjoys the jokes, the cigars, the specific persona he presents to Rob and Jane.
He mentions that the other personality has a warm spot in its heart for him.
Which is such a funny image to me. That is a profound statement on individuality. You can be part of a greater whole and still be exactly you. You don't lose your unique flavor, you just add it to the cosmic soup.
Exactly.
But then the vibe totally changes because Rob, bless his heart, makes a bit of a mistake. He pushes the boundaries of the session. He asks a question about Van Elver.
Oh, the Van Elver incident.
Exactly.
We really need to give you some context here because this is hilarious.
So Rob is a painter. He's a commercial artist, and he is always looking for practical tips. In previous experiments they did with Ouija boards and other mediums, a spirit claiming to be named Van Elver had supposedly come through giving very specific advice on painting technique.
Specifically about using sepia tones to create depth and warmth in portraits. And Rob has been obsessing over this. He wants the full technical manual. He wants to know exactly how to mix the paints.
So in the middle of this deeply profound cosmic discussion about star ghosts and the evolution of the human brain, Rob just asks Seth, "Hey, anything from Van Elver?"
You can almost hear the record scratch in the room. Seth says, "I do not know to what you refer."
Rob is surprised. He explains who Van Elver is. He's like, the spirit guy with the sepia tips. And Seth's response is just, "It's the ultimate shade."
He says, "Now. It is a big universe, and we do not travel in the same circles."
We do not travel in the same circles. That is so polite, but so cutting. It's the cosmic equivalent of saying, "I don't know her."
It's hilarious, but it's also highly instructive. We tend to think that the spirit world is just one big waiting room where everyone knows everyone else. Like, "Oh, you're dead. Do you know Elvis? Do you know Uncle Bob? Do you know Van Elver?"
And Seth is firmly saying, look, there are hierarchies here. There are different frequencies.
Exactly. Seth is a teacher of reality creation and consciousness evolution. Van Elver is a guy giving tips on sepia wash. Seth implies that their circles of activity are completely different.
It's like asking a Nobel Prize-winning physicist if he knows the guy who fixes the photocopier in the basement. They might work in the same building, sure, but they aren't having lunch together.
That's a perfect analogy. And Seth is clearly a little annoyed by the interruption. He says, somewhat begrudgingly, when he clearly communicates with me, then I will question him in that regard.
It's exactly like a tired boss agreeing to forward an email just to get you off his back. Fine, if I see him at the water cooler, I'll ask.
But it really grounds the experience. It reminds us that Seth is a distinct personality. He has boundaries. He has patience limits. He isn't just a cosmic vending machine that dispenses answers to every trivial question one can think of.
And it teaches Rob and us a lesson about respect. Just because you can communicate with non-physical intelligence doesn't mean you should pester about literally everything. You have to do the work yourself. Rob needs to figure out his own painting technique.
Which goes right back to value fulfillment. Rob's value fulfillment is learning to paint through trial and error, not being handed cheat codes by a ghost.
That is a brilliant connection. If Van Elver just told him exactly what to do, Rob wouldn't grow at all.
Exactly. The struggle itself is the entire point.
Before they wrap up the session, there is one more practical nugget regarding Jane. She had written a book on dreams. This is before the Seth material book became famous, and she was trying to get it published.
Right. She had these very vivid dreams and strong intuitive impressions that it was going to be published instantly. She felt it was a totally done deal.
And Rob asks about this. He wants to know if Jane's intuition was accurate. Is the big book deal coming right now?
And Seth explains a very common pitfall of intuition. He says the impressions were misplaced in time.
He says he, meaning Jane, leaped ahead into the future out of desire. The impressions were entirely misplaced in time.
I think every creative person needs to hear this. You have a vision of success. You feel it. It feels completely real. And Seth says, it is real. The event genuinely exists. But your desire for it to happen right now acts like a distorting lens. It magnifies the event.
Desire distorts distance. It pulls the future event into your present perception. So you think, oh, it's happening tomorrow simply because you want it to happen tomorrow so badly.
It's exactly like looking through a pair of strong binoculars. The mountain peak looks like it's right in front of your face, but you still have a 10-mile hike through the woods to actually get to it.
So the psychic hit isn't wrong. The event is definitely on the timeline. But the scheduling is off because your intense emotions got involved.
It's a call for emotional detachment. You have to be able to receive the intuitive information without aggressively grabbing at it. If you grab, you distort.
Which is the hardest thing in the world to do when it's something you really care about.
It is. But that's the training. That's exactly how you upgrade the hardware we were talking about.
So let's look back at the toolkit session 428 has given us today. We have the hardware upgrade model, the idea that learning actively changes your physical brain. We have the starlight model, showing how we leave behind conscious guides for others. We have value fulfillment entirely replacing the stress of purpose. And we have the crucial lesson of desire distorting time.
It's a session fundamentally about legacy and mechanics.
Yeah.
How does the universe actually work? It works through growth. The physical brain grows, the soul grows, the light travels onward.
It really makes me think about my own life differently. Every time I solve a complex problem or comfort a friend or even just sit and think deeply about these cosmic topics, I'm building something. I'm building a new pathway.
You are. You are actively leaving a light on for whoever comes next down that road.
And that brings us to our final provocative thought for you today. And this one might actually keep you up at night.
If Seth is right, that personalities leave behind psychological ghosts or frameworks that act exactly like people, frameworks that are conscious and purposeful,
Go on.
how do you know you aren't one of them?
Wait, unpack that for a second.
If a higher self moves on to a completely new dimension and leaves a light behind to live out a physical life and help others navigate, how much of your current identity is the actual star and how much is just the light? Are you the projector or are you the projection?
That is terrifying and also wildly exhilarating.
It directly connects to the idea of the multidimensional self. Maybe the you that you think is the absolute center of the universe is actually just the probe sent out by a much larger you that is already busy elsewhere. You are the starlight, actively exploring the dark landscape.
I feel like I need to check my own pulse right now.
You're real. The light is real. That's what actually matters.
I'm going to need to sit with that one for a good long while. Maybe look at the stars tonight and just ask them.
It's a perfect night for it.
If you want to dive deeper into this, and trust me, we barely scratched the surface of the intense neurology stuff and the specific exercises they go over, you really need to get the books and read them yourself.
Absolutely. This was session 428 from the early sessions, book 9 of the Seth material. You can find these books and support the preservation of this incredible work by visiting sethcenter.com for the early sessions.
The New Awareness Network does an incredible job keeping these archives available for all of us. They are the publisher, and the reason we can even have this conversation today. Go check them out at their bookstore.
And keep your light shining out there. You never know who is using it to find their way in the dark.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We will see you in the next dimension.